This is the Culture Study Podcast, and I'm Anne Helen Peterson.
And I am Chris Latre.
Chris, what do you do?
I'm a writer, and I'm the current Montana State Poet Laureate, and I'm kind of a public speaker, I guess, now. Sometimes I feel like I'm more that than a writer, but I do lots of different things. It's how one cobbles together the writing full-time life, is by doing a lot of different things and saying yes to things that you never imagined being asked to do in the first place.
Like, did you ever think that you would teach elementary school students about poetry?
The bigger stretch is teaching graduate students writing, and I've never taken a college class in writing or any of that stuff. That's the bigger stretch for me.
Right. Because like younger kids, you can just be like, what's the cool sounds in here? Where can we find this? Like, what's cool?
Right.
Yeah.
Or I can just glower at them for 35 minutes. And you can't get away with that with graduate students.
Do you have to teach like a 3-hour seminar, or is it shorter?
I did. So I was the 2025 William Kittredge Distinguished Visiting Writer in the Environmental Writing Department at the University of Montana this past spring semester. So, and it was, one class a week for 3 hours at a time. And it was a blast, but, I was the least educated person in the room. And so it can be a little intimidating because these people are paying,
But they're paying because they want to hear from you, which is amazing.
I guess.
Yeah. And you're a good talker, just generally. I have a lot of favorite Montana writers, but I think you're in competition for number one right now.
Well, who do I have to knock off to get to that spot?
Richard Hugo.
Okay.
He's my favorite Montana poet and has been for a really long time.
Well, thank you for that.
But you also have a lot of opinions about Montana. And we always, for all of these shows, we always want someone who loves the place that they're from and the culture that they come from, but also are willing to interrogate it and talk shit about it too.
Yeah, because we can.
Yeah. You're vested with the ability to talk shit because of your, how do you say that word? Bona fides? Bona fides? I say
bona fides, I guess.
Okay, we're going to kick things off with a lighthearted question from Jordan.
Are huckleberry milkshakes and bison burgers just for tourists? How old is old enough to drive a tractor?
Okay, what are your huckleberry thoughts?
I'd love huckleberry ice creams. Like when I go to Big Dipper in Missoula and get an ice cream cone, it's going to be like huckleberry and strawberry or huckleberry and maple nut or maybe, any of those three in combination.
Some people don't believe that huckleberries exist.
Ask a bunch of grizzly bears if huckleberries exist, and then ask them why there aren't as many because people keep going up and taking them. So I feel like grizzlies should be allowed a certain body count as far as huckleberry pickers every year, just in trade-off for them losing access to a key part of their diet.
So huckleberries, some people that I know who haven't been to the Northwest, they think it's one of those fruits that are made up by a sparkling water company, to evoke a feeling of a berry. But they are very much a thing. A lot of people go huckleberry picking. I don't love them just plain. I like eating them on a hike or something, but you know how at the farmer's market they'll sell 2 cups of huckleberries? That's not a nice snack to me. They're too sour.
Throw it in a smoothie or something.
Yeah.
With a lot of sugary protein powder, right?
Yes, exactly. What about, bison burgers? I feel like that's something that they sell at places near the national parks to make people feel like they're in the West. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't encounter them that. I have a rule with myself that if I go to a restaurant and there's a bison steak on the menu or a bison burger, I am culturally obligated to eat it.
Yes.
And pretty much the only meat I eat at home is bison. So for me, there's nothing flippant about it because I am here because I am part of a long line of the greatest buffalo hunters the world has ever seen. So I have that perspective on it. But you're right. Yes. It becomes one of those things that people use to, even like Indians, we used to call the drive between Columbia Falls and Glacier National Park Rubber Tomahawk Row, just all the gift shops selling, that kind of shit. And I hate to see buffalo meat used as a commodity or a touristy thing. But
Yeah.
I had never considered that, but it's probably true.
Yeah, it's like a cultural signifier. I remember like the first time I started seeing it was around like early 2000s when I was working outside of Grand Teton National Park. And I think it was like part of an overall signifier of like, or an attractant of what we called dudes, because I worked on a dude ranch.
Yeah.
But when did you start driving a car? How old were you?
Well, legally, or who's listening to this podcast?
Someone is going to time travel and arrest you.
Yeah, we just drove. That the whole a tractor's one thing, a car is another.
Totally.
I had a friend growing up I grew up 6 Mile, which is west of Missoula, and we were probably 12, and he had like a Volkswagen chassis that was kind of turned into a dune buggy.
Yeah.
And we'd ride around in that thing. And, he did 90% of the driving, but, we were 12.
Yep.
And we were driving this thing. And, growing up in the rural communities that I did, that's just what you did, and it's what still happens up in places like, in the Flathead Valley, and I'm sure in the Bitterroot Valley and all that stuff. It's no different. I'd rather see a 12-year-old driving a tractor than an 80-year-old bombing down the highway in one of those side-by-side things that people buy now.
Yes.
I mean, those things are a menace in a way that us in tractors never were.
I always amaze people when I talk about getting my daylight license in Idaho and how people had them young enough that people would drive to junior high.
Yeah.
Like that was, and also I had friends who lived on farms and who started driving truck, which was like grain trucks on the farm.
Driving truck. You just like lapsed into Lewiston, Idaho speak there with driving truck.
I know. But they started driving truck when they were like 12, and it was legal because if you're operating a farm vehicle on your farm, then you can drive, like the grain truck to the grain silo.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes it's like, yes, obviously, your like frontal lobe or whatever is not fully developed. Like you're not as good of a driver as like maybe I am now. I don't know. But sometimes it's relative, right? And some of these things are developed in order so that people can get to school when they couldn't otherwise get to school. Or
another thing, like during hunting season,
you go.
When I was in high school, at any given time, there were half a dozen trucks, pickups out in the parking lot with a rifle on a rack.
Same. This was like in 1998.
Exactly.
And that's a key date because it was pre-Columbine. And I think a lot of that began to shift after Columbine. But up until that date, they would park in the hick lot with their big old trucks, and because they had been hunting before school.
Right. Or they were going right after or whatever. But yeah, that was just how it was.
We should clarify. I can't believe we haven't done this yet. I grew up in Idaho. I spent a lot of time in Montana when I was a kid. And then I lived in Montana from 2017 through 2020. And I did a lot of reporting in Montana. So that's part of, like, I always thought, like, people like, why didn't you move back to Idaho? At the time, I would say Montana is very similar to Idaho, but better politics. I still think actually Montana slightly better politics now, but only slightly. But that's changed a lot. And we're going to get to that. Today's episode is brought to you by ZocDoc. Remember that doctor's appointment that you were supposed to make a long time ago? The one that you meant to book and then you got sidetracked and completely forgot about it? For me, it's an appointment with my dermatologist to get my moles checked because that is something that anyone with moles should do like every year. And I always forget. In part because there's like this incredibly difficult system to try to figure out like, okay, who did my doctor actually refer me to? And like, I call them and it's like this weird system. What if there was a different way? You could book it today using ZocDoc. ZocDoc makes it easy to find the right doctor right now, and it's all online. You'll probably be able to book an appointment before the end of this ad. ZocDoc is a free app and a website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. With ZocDoc, you can book in-network appointments with more than 100,000 doctors across every specialty, including dermatology, from mental health to dental health, primary care to urgent care, and more. You can filter for doctors who take your insurance, are located nearby, are a good fit for any medical need you may have, and are highly rated by verified patients. And once you find the right doctor, you can see their actual appointment openings. Choose a time slot that works for you and click to instantly book a visit. Appointments made through ZocDoc also happen fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking. More often than not, you can even get same-day appointments. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/culture to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/culture. ZocDoc.com/culture. Today's episode is brought to you by Blissy. So I had no idea that my gross pillowcase could be the reason why my skin still sometimes looks like I'm 16, or that my hair breaks like I've been like putting it in like an actual rubber band. You know how like if you put your hair in a rubber band then it breaks all over the place? Turns out that a really bad pillowcase could do this to you, but not if you use Blissy. So Blissy is made out of silk, not satin, silk. It's a pillowcase. It eliminates frizz, preserves your hairstyle if you have a hairstyle that's worth preserving. I do not. And protects color-treated hair, aka mine. It's dermatologist tested and recommended, and it is clinically proven to not clog pores, unlike, say, cotton covered in dog hair, aka my previous pillowcase. It promotes better sleep, it's easy to care for, it's machine washable, and it comes in over 70 colors so you can match to whatever other sheets that you have on your bed. And you know what? If you have someone in your life, and I have some people in my life like this, who have like everything, this is a perfect gift for them because this is like pure luxury. You're like, you are a fancy person who deserves a silk pillowcase. Blissy is offering 60 nights risk-free plus an additional 30% off when you shop at blissy.com/culturepod. You can find all of the links to these codes, by the way, in the show notes. That's BLISSY.com/culturepod and use code culturepod to get an additional 30% off. Your hair and skin will thank you. Next question. I love talking about the major cities in Montana. I don't think anyone, hopefully we can make other people love these great cities as much as we can. So This question comes from Karen.
I have lived in Montana for 21 years, and one thing that has always fascinated me about the state is how uniquely different each of the largest cities and towns are. Missoula has always been labeled the liberal hippie town. Bozeman has more of a tech vibe. Great Falls and Billings are still kind of ranch conservative. And Butte has a tough town vibe shaped by a century of mining. So my question is, why do you think that is? And how much do you think that will change as more and more people move into Montana from other states?
I love this question. We're also doing an episode on Texas with Sam Sanders. And like a lot of the questions are about how Texas is actually a state of like 6 different cultures. And I think Montana has different cultures as well that are pretty distinct, that come together to create this Montana ethos. I will just say before we start that like the place that I always defend that people just endlessly talk shit about in Montana is the biggest city in the state, Billings. I don't hate it. It's not bad.
I don't hate it either. Yeah, I don't hate any of the cities in Montana.
Even Bozeman? Bozeman?
I am sitting in Bozeman right now. The city I'm going to talk shit the most about is Missoula.
Yeah.
Because that's the city I've been closest to my entire life.
Yeah.
And, those definitions in the question, I think they're not so much changing, they've changed. Missoula is not the hippie liberal town it was like when I was a teenager. Yeah. It's a kind of bougie wannabe Bozeman at this point.
I agree.
Because Bozeman has become, I don't know that it's techie so much as just incredible wealth. And wherever that wealth comes from, maybe it is tech and science based, and I've kind of lost track of what the focus of the two universities are,
It
but
used to be, we should say historically, that it was like people would call University of Montana like the dancing school. That if you were from Montana and you were choosing schools, like it was the school you went to for like arts.
yeah.
And Montana State has historically been the ag school. And now that's transitioned a lot into tech, and in part through the support of the Montana State governor, who is a tech person himself, Greg Gianforte.
Right. And the wealthiest member of Congress when he was there. Is he a billionaire, or is he just one of those lowly millionaires?
I don't think he's quite I don't know.
Not quite?
But bad politics. We'll just say that. So those definitions that we heard in the question, what else would you like expand that? Like, to me, Great Falls is almost stuck in amber in a really wonderful way. It reminds me so much of where I came from, in part because of the river going through and like the way that the light works. I don't know. And it just has resisted the same sort of influx in a way that like the Flathead Valley hasn't, and Bozeman hasn't.
Yeah.
And Billings, there's a lot of people who move there. It might not have like a distinct culture in people's minds, but no one's going to Great Falls.
You're right. I mean, Great Falls lacks that immediate surrounding. There's a beauty there, but I don't know that it's as accessible to most people as like Bozeman, where every direction you look, there's mountains, and Yellowstone is just, a short drive away, and it's just a beautiful valley. Same said with Missoula, and even Billings. Once you get out east of the city, it's absolutely gorgeous, and there's no one out there. Great Falls is just, it's a hard city to love. And I spend a lot of time up there because that's where my tribe, the Little Shell, are based. And, I had the conversation with our tribal chairman who lives in Helena.
Yeah.
And who used to live in Billings, but moved to Helena to be closer to Great Falls. And I told him, I'd like to be more involved with the tribe. I'd have to move to Great Falls, and I don't really want to. And he said, yeah, I don't want to either. It's just, you're trapped in amber is such a great way to put it, because there was a time there where it seemed like it was beginning to have a moment, and then that moment just kind of fizzled away. And now, it used to be a really strong kind of union town also, not dissimilar from Butte, and that's all changed too. Now it's just a seething cesspool of right-wing ignorant rhetoric, and it's challenging to go there and kind of immerse in that environment.
Yeah, Trump did a rally in Great Falls. I covered it. That was when he was just so mad at John Tester and was like, I'm going to come to the state as many times as possible just to piss you off. And John Tester still won that election, for what it's worth. But I think that like a lot of these towns, like a lot of places in the United States, like they have these roots in whatever industry used to be their guiding force. And now, at least in Montana, there's this real tension between tourism becoming the animating force or just like being a place where retirees move, like the Flathead.
Mm-hmm. Well, we saw that during COVID when so many people came and just kind of hid out. So all of the campgrounds were full, and even the access points to the various reservoirs and lakes up on the reservation, they had to close those and put, people out there, checking tribal IDs, and they only made them available to people who were enrolled with the tribe. They had to, because their own people couldn't access these places because of all the people. And even reservation land was being bought, land on the reservation that was lost due to homesteading and due to the allotment era, which is a whole nother conversation. But a lot of that property was getting bought up sight unseen and drove prices up all there. So even Great Falls, a community like Shoto, where I'm going this weekend for a Métis celebration, is 40 miles outside of Great Falls. But it used to be one of those little communities that I thought, if all else fails, I'll buy an acre in Shoto and just be a hermit for the rest of my life. But that's inaccessible, because even out there, the land prices have been driven up so much, the housing costs.
Yep.
So Butte is kind of the last place that still hasn't totally been just overrun with big money. And
Yeah.
there are a lot of artists and stuff from Missoula who have relocated to Butte because that's kind of the last holdout. And people who work in Bozeman, you know, which is a little more than an hour away from Butte, are living in Butte and commuting because they don't want to live in an RV, you know, off the side of a road here with gainful employment, you know?
Yeah.
Because Bozeman is so expensive.
And it's not even that they're like, oh, I only want to buy something. It's that there's nothing to rent even in Bozeman. Like that's how dire the housing situation is.
Mm-hmm.
This tees us up well for our next question about the pandemic population boom. This comes from Jessica.
My dad's family is from Montana, and going back to visit over the past 30 years has shown some real tensions between the white people who have lived there for generations and the newcomers, especially after the pandemic population boom. At times, it feels like the whole state is simultaneously gentrifying while trying to hold on to its iconoclastic, rugged, individualistic identity. Is there a sense that there's a loss of an authentic Montana identity going on right now? And is that even a thing that can exist in the context of white settler colonialism?
See, Chris, I told you we could talk about anything you want here.
Yeah,
like we're going
lot.
to explicitly evoke white settler colonialism here. I love this question because I think that a lot of Montanans have this idea of like authentic Montana culture. And to me, it's always evoked most vividly in the like people who run for office in Montana who say like, I'm 4th generation Montanan or I'm 5th generation Montanan, which is as far back as the white settlers can kind of go. And then I just loved when Denise Juneau ran for office and was like, I don't know, she said like 250th generation Montanan, right? Just to like put a little underline under what it actually means to be from a place for a really long time and who has been in these places for a longer time.
Yeah.
So what does this make you think about?
Well, it's multi-layered. So first I have to say, you know, the people in Montana, and I have empathy and compassion for them who can't afford to live here, who have lived here for however many generations that they want to brag about, you know, and now they're being forced out. And it's like, you know, welcome to the last 500 fucking years for us. You know, when all of a sudden you have a class of people moving into your place in 100% backed by the wealth and power of the mightiest nation on the planet, which has always been the case. And it sucks. And you didn't care about it until it came knocking on your door. And so there's that.
Yep.
But also, you know, the kind of the Montana culture, you know, has nothing to do with the Yellowstone TV show that I think a lot of people try and attach themselves to. You know, to me, the Montana culture that I grew up in is, you know, there's a story I tell about a neighbor I used to have across the street who had like Trump stickers on the back of his truck and all that stuff. And I'd see him hauling his guns in and out of the house to go target shooting in the range up in the hills on the other side of the river and all of that stuff. But as far as a neighbor goes, he was a great neighbor.
Yep.
You know, he was friendly. I knew if I was gone, he was going to be looking out. One time we had another neighbor kind of kitty corner from my house and across the road from his house. And she clearly had some situations going on. And, she, you know, one Friday afternoon, she came home and her power had been turned off and she wasn't going to be able to get in and pay for it until Monday. And the Trump guy's wife came over and was saying, do you have any long extension cords? And between our two houses, we ran extension cords across the road so that she had power over the weekend. To me, that is what Montana culture is neighbors looking out for neighbors, people with different ideas getting along anyway. And that's what's kind of gone by the wayside is people, you know, like an example, just like yesterday I heard about it, you know, Gianforte, you know, you can't fly a pride flag in public buildings. And I might get this a little bit off, but like teachers can't have pride flags in their classrooms and things like that. So the Missoula City Council, but you can have one of those stupid Gadsden flags, you know, the don't tread on me thing. Yes. And so the Missoula City Council and this recommendation or whatever they call it was written by my friend Jen Savage, who I'm going to email and thank wholeheartedly and tell her how proud of her I am. They moved at the city council level to make it a municipal flag, because if it's a municipal flag, then you can fly it in places like schools and stuff. And now Gianforte is all in a tizzy about it, and all these other people are all in a tizzy about it. But that's Missoula too.
Yeah.
The cowboy might shake his head at the punk rocker or whatever, all the different ways that we present ourselves to the world. But we generally got along with each other despite our differences. And that is what has changed.
Yeah.
And that's what troubles me about it.
I think that to me, it's exemplified by the shift from split ticket voting, which was something that Montana was renowned for. A lot of states, Idaho, same thing. There were a lot of voters who would vote for one candidate with one political party on the national level, or for their representatives on the national level, and then for a very different party on the local level. And if you talk to people about this, which I did a lot of talking to split ticket voters, people who had split ticket voted historically, they would say it's all about the person.
Yeah.
And it's all about advocacy. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that the parties used to be a lot closer together. So that shift between voting for, say, Tester and Trump wasn't as massive as we now think it is, right? But the other thing was just like less of a desire to understand oneself purely through politics, right? And understand one's identity and orientation to others.
Well, yeah, I think there are a lot of people voting for Republican just because that's part of their identity without even connecting to what that really means anymore and what kind of policies they're advocating for with that vote. Tester's loss to me is the most like glaring indication of how Montana has changed, because Tester is like the perfect Montanan. He kind of straddled both sides of ideological values in Montana. In a lot of ways, he was just Republican light. In a lot of ways, he was progressive as a kind of a liberal person. And he did a lot for the state, and he lost to a guy who's an absolute ignoramus, who just is a jaw and a haircut. And people just voted for him because he's Republican, and Tester, I didn't agree with everything, and I don't feel like I should agree with everything that a politician does. I found his position on Gaza repugnant. And if I think about how long he was in the Senate, if I think there should be term limits, and I do, he was probably due to be gone anyway because he'd been there a long time. But just what it says about our electorate here in Montana and the fact that he lost, and really lost pretty badly, that is an example of like where we are now and just how not anyway like what we would traditionally consider Montana values. We're just miles away.
Yeah. So this is a great tee up for our next question, which is somewhat about like the hollowing out of those values while also like talking about them all the time. This comes from a different listener, also named Jessica.
Okay.
It's about state pride.
So I grew up in Bozeman, Montana, and have been happily settled in the Flathead Valley for over a decade now. In my 20s and 30s, though, I lived several other places and worked with people from all over the U.S. I noticed that Montana seemed to be uniquely in love with itself, as evidenced by the plethora of T-shirts and artwork with the outline of the state, the 406 bumper stickers, the Steinbeck "In Love with Montana" quote everywhere, the Last Best Place coffee book in every living room, etc. I am admittedly obsessed with Montana myself and have owned a fair amount of the swag over the years, so I'm not judging. Am I right in thinking that this is somewhat unique to Montana? And if so, why? I know it's a very beautiful state, but so is Colorado, for example, where I've also lived, and it doesn't seem to have the same degree of self-obsession. Also, has all of this loud Montana pride contributed to it becoming one of the most expensive states to live in since the pandemic and the increase of jobs that became remote?
Okay, let's segment off the remote part for now, because we should just talk about a little bit of what we're talking about. I'll put some links in the show notes, but like the 406 stuff. So 406 is the area code for Montana, and people who haven't lived in big rural states are sometimes aghast that an entire state can have the same area code.
Exactly.
They celebrate like April 6th, and like because it's 406 Day, there will be like shirts that have an outline of Montana that somehow has like 406 in it somehow, and bumper stickers. And when my partner Charlie moved with me to Montana, the first summer he was like, so many people in Montana are like wearing the band swag to the concert. Like it is unlike any place I have ever lived in terms of Montana people wearing Montana stuff. What do you think is going on here?
Well, I have a couple thoughts on that. I was just in Colorado like a week ago, and I see the same shit there as we have here. And the politicians are doing the same. Oh, I'm a whatever, or even the writers. Well, as a fifth generation Coloradan, I believe that I have the right to write this thing, or, all that stuff. And I have a theory on this. We don't have any major sports teams.
Yes.
So think about how many jackasses are walking around in like Boston Red Sox hats or New York Yankees hats. And you are not just celebrating your team, you're celebrating the fact that it's New York,
Yeah.
So I wonder if part of it is just that we don't have anything else to kind of, I almost said hang our hat on, but kind of express that regional pride, because sports teams largely are a regional pride thing. I hate the Red Sox and I hate the Yankees too. I just want to make that clear. And I hate the Los Angeles Dodgers. So
who do you root for?
Mariners.
Yeah, I know.
That's the closest.
This is the thing that people also don't understand, because I grew up rooting for the Mariners and the Seahawks and the Supersonics, like in Idaho.
I cannot cheer for the Oklahoma City Thunder in this year's NBA Finals because they were moved from Seattle. So fuck the Thunder.
Have you noticed, though, there are some people in Montana who root for Denver teams?
I did
guess
growing
that's
up.
Like kind of close.
I did, because the Seattle teams didn't exist. So I was already a sports fan before the Mariners existed and before the Seahawks. And so I grew up a Denver Bronco fan. And the reason I was a Denver Bronco fan is because in the 4th grade, this girl, Jenny Miller, said, "What's your favorite football team?" My brother's is the Denver Broncos. And I had a crush on her. And I said, "Well, that's my favorite team too." So that's how I became a Broncos fan. And then the Seahawks were my mortal enemy because for years they were in the same division as the Broncos. Yeah. So there's all of that. But my point is that people have regional things that are part of their identity that they celebrate by wearing a shirt or a hat or a bumper sticker or whatever. And I think part of that is that that's all we have is our state. And I've never noticed it as being any worse here than anywhere else. Maybe it is. I don't know. I love that wearing the band t-shirt.
No one wears an Idaho t-shirt. Like, actually, some people from Boise would wear an Idaho t-shirt, but very few people from Idaho were like, Idaho, fuck yes.
Well, and I wonder how many of those people wearing the Montana shit have been here very long.
Yeah.
They were just proud to be here because, like, the back end of that question, people move here because it is great. It is beautiful. We have some of the best, like, stream access laws, for people who want to get out on the water, things like that. Our Constitution, which was in 1973, 1972, is decades ahead of its time. And as far as some of the, the values that we wrote into our governing document, and so there is something to be proud of, even as there's plenty of things not to be.
Yeah. No, and I think that the beauty is otherworldly in a way that is difficult to understand until you have experienced its immensity. And I'm not just talking about going to Glacier or going to Yellowstone. Like, it's one of those places where you're like, oh, here's another fucking gorgeous place that there's no one around.
And you don't have to, like, that's it. I was just out in the Bay Area a couple days ago, and I'd pull up something. I want to go, it's only 15 miles away. It will take you an hour and 45 minutes. I'm like, fuck, an hour and 45 minutes. I'm like 150 miles down the road in Montana, So it's to me, that's worth a lot.
No, and I think that is part of what drew people is this idea of like, what if I could have all of this beauty and a lot less of the like encumbrances of living in an urban area, but could have like some culture, right? Like bands go to Montana. Mm-hmm. There are cute neighborhoods that are walkable. There's like a lot of open space, again, because of like lifelong conservation work that allows open access. Like there's stuff there. Today's episode is brought to you by Beam Dream. People think that podcasting is just talking into a microphone, but let me tell you, my brain does not shut off when I turn the mic off. So between planning episodes, like thinking about who the next guest will be, figuring out how to make sure that my dogs don't bark while I'm recording, and just that 3 a.m. spiral where I think about like, what if Melody forgets to cut that really embarrassing thing that I said? Sleep is not always easy for me. And it's really helpful if I have just a little help to wind down. Not knock me out, but help me wake up feeling like a functioning human. Beam's Dream Powder really helps. It's an all-natural sleep blend with science-backed ingredients designed to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, that's key, and wake up refreshed. And unlike other sleep aids, there is no next-day grogginess, just real deep sleep that helps you actually feel good in the morning. Since I added Dream to my nighttime routine, I am sleeping through the night without tossing and turning as much, and I wake up pretty refreshed. Not groggy, not exhausted, just ready to take on the day. I'm not the only one. Beam has improved over 17.5 million nights of sleep. 92% of users surveyed reported better sleep and waking up refreshed. Plus, for a limited time, Beam is giving my listeners their best offer yet, up to 40% off. Try their best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off for a limited time. Go to shopbeam.com/culture and use code CULTURE at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/culture and use code CULTURE for up to 40% off. Today's episode is brought to you by Blueland. I know everyone is really concerned about microplastics, especially in cleaning products, stuff that you're putting on your surfaces, that your dogs are licking, that your children are eating off of, that you're eating off of. Most people don't know that they're in their cleaning products that they're using every day. That's part of why I've made the switch to Blueland across all my cleaning products around the house. Their products meet the highest standard of clean. They're effective, but they're also gentle on my family and the planet. My family includes my dogs, who lick my clean surfaces. Blueland was also named an EPA Safer Choice Partner of the Year. From cleaning sprays and toilet bowl cleaner to dishwasher and laundry detergent tablets, Blueland's formulas are 100% microplastic free, made with certified clean ingredients, free from chlorine, bleach, and harsh chemicals that are safe to use around my partner, my pets, all of the houseplants in my house. I truly have like 50 houseplants in my house. I don't want to get microplastics on my houseplants. I love not having to choose between the safe option and what actually gets my house clean. Blueland products are independently tested to perform alongside major brands and are free from dyes, bleach, and harsh chemicals. Blueland is also trusted in over 1 million homes, including mine. I just got to keep talking about the toilet tablets. Melody, have you used the toilet tablets?
You know I don't clean my house.
Has Bobby used the toilet tablets?
Yes. I actually asked him the other day what we needed refills on, and that was his first answer.
Yeah, I love it because, like, you just notice after, I don't know, a couple weeks, you're like, there's just a little bit of like mold and stuff in there. Like, not mold. It's just like
the like pink ring.
Yeah, just the color is just a little different. And you're like,
yeah.
But I don't feel like necessarily getting out my scrub brush and like going to town. What if I just put in one of these tablets? And they also work on stains, including rust, mineral deposits, limescale, and hard water, which is a big problem. Everyone here on the island, we're all on different forms of well water. So like I have been singing the praises of these tablets to all of my friends who live here. And right now, Blueland has a special offer for listeners. You can get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/culture. You don't want to miss this. Blueland.com/culture for 15% off. That's blueland.com/culture to get 15% off. Let's talk about this last question because this will give us an opportunity to wax poetic a little bit more about Montana as well. This comes from Lucy.
I've lived in Colorado my whole life, and occasionally I hear that Montana nowadays is like Colorado decades ago. I think there's a romanticization of Montana as quote-unquote the last bucolic place in the West. But from what I've heard about the wealth in Montana, I'm sure this can't be true, and the idea of a pristine West is a fantasy anyways. Can you help us non-Montana folks in the West understand how the state's vibes, whether a broad brush or any components that are disproportionately influential, are or are not like the rest of the region?
There's so much that's in flux right now. But one thing I would say, like a very real difference between Montana and Idaho specifically, is for a long time there were not Bible thumpers as like a very essential part of like the state's understanding of itself. It was very much like that libertarian ethos of like what you do in your house is your own damn business.
Yeah. When I think about it, there are places that I can go, like old logging roads and stuff, where I like to go hike. And yeah, it's not glacier beauty, but it's still beautiful. And there's nobody else there.
Yep.
And when I travel and I go other places and there are beautiful places, I'm sharing it with a lot of other people, which sometimes is fine, but often is not fine, And so I am privileged to have so much open space available to me in Montana that I wouldn't have anywhere else. And, there's a lot of value to that. And that is one of the things that is under assault by both the state legislature and the federal level. But even then it's two truths, because, so many of the conservationist groups that really advocate for public lands like to kind of forget where those public lands came from in the first place. And I'm pretty adamant that is, particularly as a member of a tribe who was known as the landless Indians for more than 150 years, that has some meaning to me, because it's not like we weren't here with places to live for a long time that were taken away from us. So both sides of that conversation need to be addressed every time we have it. And I'm 2 generations removed from when my ancestors could have been imprisoned or killed for leaving the reservation. So, what's happening now is like kind of that cyclical nature of time and how we just keep making the same mistakes over and over again until we decide we want to do something a little differently to change how we interact with that. But, that's kind of an aside to the fact that Montana is an absolutely beautiful place. And, at any given time when I'm home, or even here in Bozeman right now, I'm half an hour away from something that there are people all around the world who are just fantasizing about a chance to come and, stand in the river or sit on a trail, just whatever it is. It's all right here. And, we're very fortunate to have that.
For people who don't know what public lands are, I found that like this is something that we grow up knowing and understanding what public lands are and how they are used. But a lot of people in the East, because like there isn't public lands in the same way, like they hear the word public lands and they think like national parks.
Yeah.
So could you explain a little bit what we mean by public lands?
Public lands are, places where anybody can go. If you're a citizen, you're, that the backcountry hunters and anglers have a T-shirt that the, the insignia across the chest says, or on the back says public lands owner. They're available to all of us to recreate, to picnic, to hike, to do whatever it is that we want to go and do out there. Hunting, public lands are accessible to hunters, which is still a large part of our culture here. And, like in Texas, ask your Texas guest how many public lands they have. I think it's only like 5% or something.
Right.
And we kind of, I think, take it for granted that we can just go anywhere. And I do.
Yeah.
Nothing says come on in like a no trespassing sign as far as I'm concerned,
This is somewhat contentious now, but like creeks are public lands. So like if you're walking in the creek, you can even walk into someone's private ranch area as long as you're in the creek.
Yeah, you have access and to the land up to the high water mark.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things that is really under assault right now is those, because these billionaires come in and buy up these huge swaths of land. And, they even refer to the wildlife living there as my deer and my elk and all that stuff. And they're not.
Which is how it is in Texas, is like people have these large ranches that people can come to and shoot their deer and their elk.
Yeah.
And I think the understanding with Montana, originally part of the reason when the government took all of the land of the indigenous people was like, well, now we got to manage it because we can't. Like they tried to give it away. They tried to give it away to white people. But a lot of it is hostile to cultivation. And so who's going to take care of it? The government's going to take care of it. And then we all get access to it. But now, like this is one of the slogans you hear a lot is like Montana is not for sale. But it is kind of for sale under our current legislation.
It kind of is.
Right?
Always has been.
Yeah. If someone wanted to buy it,
Mm-hmm.
and the current, I think a lot of the fight is like people who believe think in their hearts, like this is central to what Montana is. But
did you see Pony is for sale? The town of Pony is for sale. It comes with like a like 3 or 4 buildings or something like that. Yeah, the entire town of Pony is for sale.
Well, and that gets to the heart of like this also this vaunting of like the capitalist ethos. So how do we believe in what is fundamentally almost a socialist ethic of like this land is all of our land? Yeah. And well, if people have money, they should be able to buy things.
Yeah, I'm not a private property advocate in any way.
Yeah. So
which is a whole nother conversation.
Yes. The other thing I think about a lot is like Montana is one of a very small handful of states that has like a very significant native voting bloc. Like the native vote can sway elections.
It can. Yeah. And I think we're the 5th most populated as far as native population in the country. I think we're number 5. And even then, that's only 7% of the population. So it's not a huge, but in certain areas for sure, like the Blackfeet, that county is per capita the bluest voting county in the state, and people have to pay attention to natives here because those votes do matter in these very close elections.
Yeah.
Or like the CSKT, and yeah, it does matter.
Yeah.
It's hard to... It's kind of what you're familiar with. So, the Pacific Northwest where you are is beautiful, but there are so many people, yes. and to me, that's what you're balancing is some people like that. And I don't, and I've never lived in any of the other, I was in the Seattle area for 10 or 12 years, but that was, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's changed drastically since then. But it's hard to say, well, why are you better than the others when you don't really have any context for what it's like to live someplace else. Yeah. I just know how much time I spend in traffic in other places. And it's changing even in Missoula too, where it used to be there was only certain times of days that you had to worry about it, but now it's all the time everywhere you are. And it's still not as bad as the places, what I experience in other parts of the country, but that's one of the changes, but I still like the wide openness of Montana.
Yeah.
And it has to change a lot before that goes away.
Yeah. No, I think about how I didn't drive on a freeway until I was 19 growing up where I lived in Idaho. And there are a lot of places in Montana, if you're not along the I-90 corridor, where you wouldn't really have reason to drive on a freeway. Or when you drive on a freeway, there is no traffic. That is mind-boggling to people. There is never a slowdown unless there's road construction. But there is never, that is not the experience of driving. The experience of driving is always moving.
Yeah. Like I said, hour and a half is more than 100 miles.
Yeah.
I went to high school in Colorado along the Front Range, and literally all I think about is the urban sprawl.
Yeah.
And it's just... as far as you can see, it's just housing developments of houses crammed together, and the traffic is terrible.
Yeah.
Colorado's beautiful. I will never, ever, ever move back there.
Yeah. I mean,
for that reason.
So hold on a second. The population of the biggest town in Montana is 120,000 people. That's the other thing to keep in mind is there's barely over 1 million people who live in the entire state, and it's the 4th biggest state in the nation.
Yeah, and Denver is 715,000.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's a very different experience of place. Okay, so our last question, love this question. It's going to lead us to some, I think, complications in the way that sometimes people think about the state. So this gets into gender and politics, and it comes from Neek.
I grew up in Montana and in retrospect was a mega non-binary kid. It didn't cause me a ton of pain except for puberty because I wasn't really held to a strict standard of normative femininity. Then when I went to a fancy pants liberal arts college in the Northeast, it was fascinating to experience other people projecting a non-cis identity onto me because I wasn't performing normative femininity. And yeah, it turns out they were right, but I bring this up because I think it's interesting how Montana does have a lot of conservative and traditional cultural vibes, but at the same time, it seems like there's rural West vibes, and I also associate it with working class, though I'm not totally confident about that facet of it. But these vibes, at least at times, have less stringent gender norms for girls and women, possibly because of the working ranch cultural vibes, even in settings where people aren't actually working on a ranch. And then I think of a kind of parallel that Montana is conservative and has had its fair share of anti-trans bullshit, But there have also been notable disruptions to that, like anti-trans bills not passing and judges ruling previously passed bills unconstitutional. I think a big part of that is the hard work of Zoe Zephyr and S.J. Howell, but I also wonder if those disruptions speak to something about Montana culture. Yes, mostly it lands on the yucky politics, but there's something embedded culturally that has been the thing that Representative Zephyr and Representative Howell have been able to tap into. Perhaps the same thing that contributed to Montana until relatively recently often being a purplish state in the sense of often having mixed party results for U.S. senators, representatives, and state governors. I wonder, is it residue from union culture, similar to how northern Minnesota is working class extractive industry but dominantly votes for Democratic farmer labor? Is it glimpses of non-hypocritical application of concepts of freedom? I want to hear your thoughts.
I have a lot of things that makes me think of, but I want to start with you.
I think the fact that we see like Supreme Court overturns of legislation, anti-trans stuff, we see that happen because that stuff is unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of it happening in Montana.
Yeah.
So, if you think of where, Zoe Zephyr is not going to get elected in Great Falls.
Yeah.
She got elected in Missoula because that's a remnant of what Missoula has been is kind of that hippie liberal thing. And I'm happy that we still retain enough of that to where she can be elected. And Howell, is it Helena?
I think Missoula. Yes. 100th district. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So the fact that they've had successes is part of where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
All of these terrible things that these governments try and do that are unconstitutional, they end up in the Supreme Court. And we hope that the Supreme Court will hold the line and recognize that the law protects people. So the fact that we see those overturnings in Montana is just more, there's a lot of it going on.
Right. Right.
So Montana is certainly no rosy place for trans people and gay people or anything like that, especially now. In the past, maybe it was different. We have that kind of libertarian live and let live mentality that I think is more, I think you nailed it as far as that being more what Montana traditionally was versus what we see it as today.
Yeah. Because
people come here and they love it and they want to fish and they want to do all that. But then they say, well, I left, Western Washington to get away from the gays and I want to get rid of them here too, And so I think a lot of that is part of that influx of people from other places.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I always want to be careful when I talk about like how much of this is the politics of other places, because I think some of the like low level bigotry was always there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Like anyone who has this fantasy of like, oh, well, Montanans weren't racist, like they should hear Montanans talk about Native people, like, or they weren't racist until the Californians arrived or something like that. But I do think that there's good demographic data about the politics of people who have moved in the last 20 years, especially to places like the Flathead Valley and the Bitterroot Valley of Montana. And a lot of them are conservatives coming from what they have come to understand are too liberal of places. So California, Colorado, Western Washington, right? Like they sometimes call it, like some of these people are searching what's called the redoubt, which is like this new promised land of like conservative like theocracy, but some of them are just like, I don't want to deal with building codes, and also there are too many trans people, right? Like there's like there's a heavy iteration and there's a light iteration. But I do think that those people, because of the way that the primary system and the way that polarization works, like they get represented in Congress by people who go along with bills which are oftentimes like duplicate bills from other states about trans bathrooms and all that sort of thing, right? Like somehow, like this is not something that the Montana legislature should be caring about.
Exactly.
It is not a fucking problem.
It's not.
But Montana is different than Idaho in that you do have these places that are bright blue, like Missoula, that will elect people and who have this, like the incredible support of their constituents to speak out very publicly and about issues, including trans bills, but also like all sorts of more like prominently leftist. Like there's still those voices are still audible in the legislature in a way that they have been completely snuffed out in like the Idaho legislature. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I also think the idea of Montana as being kind of a ranch place, maybe in the East, but I didn't grow up, none of my contemporaries, the kids I went to school with, lived on ranches or worked on ranches. We had people who, my dad was in the forest products industry, working at the paper mill, things like that, and we were all 4-H kids and things like that. And so I don't know that ranch culture has any, it might not, I just don't know, bearing on the kind of, androgynous idea of gender expression.
Yeah.
And it being okay. I don't know if there's any correlation in that, based on that question. But do you have thoughts on it?
I'm glad this person had an okay experience, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I think about my upbringing, I do think that there was just more of a little bit more of an acceptance of tomboyishness. And it worked for...
That's what it was.
Right.
It was tomboyish.
Right.
Yeah.
And it worked
for sure.
Worked for people who were assigned female at birth, I think, better than people who were assigned male at birth. Right? Like that sort of androgyny or in-betweenness. But I also think about the fact, like, I have this vivid memory of camping in Sanders County on the 4th of July and going to a town pump, and this woman gets out of the rig next to me, and she has a baby blue Glock that matches her baby blue, like, rhinestone jeans, right? Like, there is a performance of femininity in cowboy and Montana culture as well.
For sure.
So...
certainly now.
Yeah. But even like rodeo queens.
Yeah.
It's like there has been an understanding of like the Montana feminine ideal. With that said, there is also this real celebration of like Montana like was the first state to elect a woman to the House of Representatives, which is true, but we also like the state only elects Republican women now. Like it has to be like that to me is really interesting that like you can be a woman, but you have to be a conservative woman in order to be like state endorsed.
But we also have a very loud and punching above their weight, powerful Indian caucus at the state legislature. Also, a small group, but mighty and vocal and defends some important things and gets new things done, so that's part of it too.
Yeah. And
some of them are women.
And it can't be gerrymandered out of existence the way that it has in other states, right? Because like of the way where the districts are, like there's no way you can take Blackfeet Nation and be like, oh no, we're going to like combine that with Kalispell. Right. It's too much land. Like you can't do it.
Right.
Chris, this has been a delight. I really want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about Montana Indigipalooza. I'm trying to like say both of them in a really smooth way. Indigipalooza, Montana Indigipalooza. Please tell us about it.
So Indigipalooza is a big celebration celebrating, if we boil it down to one sentence, indigenous storytelling and all the ways that manifests. So the highlight is Joy Harjo is our headliner on Friday, August 1st, with a couple other people reading as well. And then Saturday is all not so much like they're just like sessions of indigenous people talking about what they do. So there's a poetry section, a more general writing section. We have a couple indigenous hip hop people who are going to come and perform. There's like an entrepreneurship of Native people and how they've kind of created their own, businesses and how that works as Native people. Yeah. So it's just this big celebration. All the events are free. Yeah. The Joy Harjo thing is the only thing that's not at the library, the Missoula Public Library, which a couple years ago was voted by some organization as the best library in the world. It's
pretty fucking awesome.
Because it's new and beautiful, and it's going to be great. Yeah. And it was something that I work with a friend, Anna East, who runs Chickadee Community Services, is one of the organizers. And then Celia Avila from the Missoula Public Library is helping coordinate, and then me. So it's so far just been the three of us. And it's going to be awesome.
And it's in part supported by the contributions of people listening to this podcast and reading this newsletter. And we want to encourage people to, if they have any extra we will put a very prominent donation page on the Culture Study podcast page for this episode.
I'm absolutely blown away by the support that's come from small donors.
Yeah.
And we hear about that in like federal elections and small donors, but if we'd pushed harder, we probably could have funded the whole thing just with small donors. Yep. We didn't have to kowtow to anybody. And then in fact, there were people who said, yeah, if we do this, and I'm like telling Anna and Celia, like, well, tell them to keep their fucking money, but because, this, we're going to talk about it more in our online interview, but I'm just blown away by how generous people are when they have the opportunity to be generous.
Yeah, I am too, over and over again. And I think Culture Study readers and listeners, like, they understand that this stuff happens in part because of our contributions to them. So,
yeah.
All right. So we'll link prominently to that. Where else? So people can find you there. You'll be there. But where else can they find your stuff online if they want to hear more from you?
Well, my Irritable Métis newsletter remains kind of the primary thing. I got a great email from someone I met last weekend who was the former poet laureate of San Francisco, Kim Shuck, and she's Cherokee, and that subject was from a cranky Cherokee to an irritable Métis, and that's probably the greatest email subject line I've ever gotten. But yeah, that's the main place where I pretty informally connect, and write and express my thoughts, and I try not to be irritable all the time, but sometimes you got to call shit out.
Well, and it's the highlight of my week. I love it so much.
Thank you.
And we will also link prominently to that in the newsletter. And you are wonderfully off Instagram.
I am. What a great decision that was.
Yes.
Oh, and Becoming Little Shell comes out in paperback on August 12th.
That's amazing. That is amazing. And we'll also link to an interview I did with you last year all about Becoming Little Shell. So
that's great.
Thank you for talking Montana culture with us. It was complicated. It was weird. It was awesome.
It was fun.
I'm going to go have some huckleberry ice cream if I can find it.
Yeah.
Actually, I would get black licorice ice cream because that's my favorite flavor from Big Dipper.
Oh, God. Black licorice is... Yeah, we could have lived the rest of our lives without me knowing about that.
No, it's so good. Oh, my God. Just get
all right.
Next time. Thanks for listening to the Culture Study Podcast. Today, paid subscribers got a bunch of recommendations from me and Chris on the places in Montana that you cannot miss. So if you're thinking about planning a trip, you're definitely going to want to check that out. And if you want to be sure you always get that bonus content, head to culturestudypod.substack.com. It's just $5 a month or $50 a year, and you'll get ad-free episodes, an exclusive advice time segment, and weekly discussion threads for each episode. You also get a great deal if you're already a subscriber to the newsletter. You can find the link to get that discount in the show notes for today. Also, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We have so many great episodes in the works. I know I say that every week, but it's really true. And I promise you don't want to miss any of them. If you want to suggest a topic, ask a question about the culture that surrounds you, or submit a question for our subscriber-only advice time segment, go to our Google form at tinyurl.com/culturestudypod or check the show notes for a link. The Culture Study Podcast is produced by me, Anne Helen Peterson, and Melody Rowell. Our music is by Poddington Bear. You can find me on Instagram at Anne Helen Peterson, Melody at Melodious47, and the show at Culture Study Pod.